Right. The first roundtable of 2023 and potentially the last, at least for me, unless people want this to change into something they want to actually contribute to and come and be part of and create projects together. What do our projects need shared? I mean, I'm totally down, of course, to help Bentley and Adriel in any way I can with their projects that are amazing and anyone else who's come through this space. But people figuring out how to help each other, how to network, how to actually do that is a lot of the work. And I feel like we've done a lot of that work. Unless there's new people coming and doing that, it's not really worth sticking around and redoing the same thing, hoping people show up. And none of us want to advertise and do any of the work that's going to.
Right. Yeah. And I think just prior to going live, as we were talking about, there might be like odds are Bentley and I will, there's a good chance that we'll do something in the sense making info, whatever we want to call our stuff, sphere, that's less about sort of just the meta projects and game view overall, and probably more in the direct sense making, like actual in the weeds, trying to solve those problems kind of conversations. I think we'd also talked about potentially doing something like this once a quarter, although I'm not sure that like that might instead be things like the competition councils, where this something, unless people show an interest in, hey, we want this meta project, this project projects. Then I guess we can continue what the three of us were doing anyway, and just not do the monthly stream.
Yeah, I think we're not probably getting enough interest to make this a regular thing yet, and then just see what people, if people have interest, we can, as we have time, kind of post the idea just so people are aware that it's an option. If you want to have people give feedback or review your things, and maybe as people post in the Game View projects, we can just politely say, hey, if you want, we're happy to hop on a public meeting and have you show your thing and give feedback and offer advice if you want it. Yeah, I think that's a good way to handle it. Also in the Canonical Debate Lab, which is another group where I talk about this project a lot. I think we're going to start kind of quarterly having everyone do a little recap of where they are on their project, and then we're going to be posting those on the website as in a separate section to kind of say, this is what we're up to. Haven't quite made sure we're going to spend enough time to do all that, but
right. But at least it seems fairly realistic, at least to do it once a quarter instead of once a month or.
Yeah. So as people come to the community, they can kind of get an idea that's not too out of date of what some people are doing.
Right. And then if something is 2 or 3 quarters, it hasn't been an update, maybe that's paused or something.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I'm realizing part of it. I love the idea of other people doing this work, right, and having projects up there. And when we first entered the Game B space, so I can only speak for myself, feeling like this is such an unique community of people who have world-saving projects and creating the project of projects, and we're people who can, I think, go a little more meta, partly because you guys' projects are sense-making, and that already has to be a little meta, right? To be like, make sense of all of it so we can make decisions, so we can do that. And being in this space and loving being in this space, loving giving people feedback on their projects, people actually don't want feedback on their projects. Like, people actually want to make the same mistake that we made on ours. Like, it's like they want to get it to perfection before they find other people. They want to, like, I'm seeing people, because of what's happened in the last few years, I don't want to use the word wake up, but more realize maybe things aren't going very well in the world and wanting things to change. And like, well, we were there 10 years ago. Want me to offer you what I learned in the last 10 years? And it's like, hard no, we just need to repeat it. Like, we just need to make a blueprint for a city. It's like, oh, resource-based economy. They tried that. That doesn't necessarily work. Anyway, sorry. That is just the...
Yeah, a lot of times people want to just kind of say what they're doing and aren't ready for feedback, depending on where they are in their journey. And that's okay. But yeah.
And that was more my lesson to learn. I think that one person who came a few weeks or months ago, we only did this once a month. I was like, oh, right. They don't necessarily know what they're entering into as far as like, here, let us say what doesn't work on your project. But no, people who actually ask for feedback, I'm not so sure they want it. Like
that's true. No, I agree that they may
Usually-
not know what that actually means.
Yeah, I think when most people ask for feedback, they're just asking for you to agree with them. They're just being like, "Hey, do you on a scale of 9 to 10, how awesome is this idea?"
Yeah,
basically, yeah.
Yeah, and I think on one of the times we did try and ask them, like, okay, so what type of feedback do you want? Do you just want us to, kind of agree with things? Do you want us to push? Do you want us to push hard? Still, people tend to your point, Jubilee, overestimate the amount of feedback and then how good they are at receiving it. So yeah, it's an interesting balance. I also do this for startups in the local community. And about half the time they ask for a deeper feedback than they're ready, and they ignore half of it. And then, a year later, they kind of learn the same lesson. I do think sometimes it helps because it like triggers that memory of, oh yeah, I've been told this by 3 different people that this was going to happen. Now it's happening, and they can adjust a little quicker if they don't just get upset when they first kind of hear it. And I know a lot of times I get feedback and I still have an emotional negative reaction to it, which is, something to work on.
Yeah, I think
going through that process over and over again, feeling the emotions, learning how to work with people. And if you're doing none of that work because you're just waiting to get your project perfect before releasing it into the world, which we're all doing too, but like at least talking to other people about it, perfecting it, like whatever that perfecting's the wrong word, but I know a lot of the work of creating Game B to me is creating community and figuring out how to work with people. And so to some degree, we can do that from day one if we can honor that is a very important piece of the step. But we all have to come to that in our own time. And we're ready for people to join our project or join other people's at different times. But there's still so many people who are creating projects, not for themselves, right? Not as an individual project, but like a world saving, everything has to change over tomorrow. Everybody has to be on board. And they are like, not that person. As somebody who had one of those, it's like, but it has progressed and changed.
Yeah. And that feeling that it's so obvious. I don't know why I can't just tell people this idea and they all join in the effort.
Exactly. A tech cooperative. How hard is that?
Right.
It's not that easy. Just tell the truth, just like tell the truth and don't have misinformation. How hard can it be? Right.
Right.
Why didn't you say that 3 years ago, Jubilee? That would have saved me so much effort.
Thanks Done. Yeah. And I guess on that point, I can talk about what I've been doing in my projects if y'all want to move to that space. All right. And I don't remember if I mentioned this last time, but I'm really actually my theme for this year, since it's kind of around New Year's, is care. So care for my mom, care for myself, care for my spouse. So it's not, and that's going to take a lot of time away from my project. But still, over the kind of New Year holiday, I kind of sat down and I wrote a video script. So I've decided one way to kind of show off the tech and kind of experiment with it is to do fact checks. And in this case, I'm actually reviewing someone else's fact check. So they did fact check and I'm reviewing it and giving them a score on how good of a fact check they did. And it's using the scoring technology. So then I can kind of demo it. And, as I'm talking through what happened, I would say like pro and con, and people could see the score changing. So That's my idea. I'm gonna post a link to a Google Doc that has comments open, and just in case anyone wants to read and give feedback. Most everyone has been fixing typos and saying, and then I ask, would you want to watch this video? And they're kind of politely saying, oh yeah, sure. So I don't know if it's actually interesting enough for me to spend the time doing
I
it.
mean, it sounds like it's a really good proof of, not that this is a useful statement, but it sort of all comes out in the wash where it'll be useful if you look at it and you're like, yeah, this actually tells the story of what this is supposed to do. And
Mhm.
ideally it's, 2 to 3 minutes of like at least a highlight reel of like, oh, I see. Here's the original thing that Bentley is trying to either prove or disprove or challenge or whatever. And then here's how that appears in this. And like, okay, here's that point and here's how it shows. If it highlights that, I think it's the kind of thing where in itself, as a standalone clip, wouldn't be terribly interesting. It would just be a proof of concept to be like, oh, I see what it's all about. I see how the software would show up with how it's meant to be used, sort of like to actually show an argument. And I think that is insanely useful because that's
Yeah,
where
and
like I conceptually understand it. I still haven't seen a full like a real world end to end. Here's how I dissect a real argument, especially if it's a super quick like 2 to 3 minute. Here's actually a video I found on YouTube of this and it talks about 3 things, and here's how we'll dissect those. I'd be interested to see that.
yeah, I'm hoping it'll be a little bit more. I think in order for me to spend my time, I would want to have it to where the content in and of itself is interesting.
Right.
Hopefully, but I guess we could see. And yes, like you're saying, it will be of value even if it doesn't meet that benchmark.
Right. And I think my guess is it'll probably take a couple runs to really, you'll do it and even you'll watch it and be like, nah, I don't know if that flows well, or like if that one, watching it back, just certain things where you're like, yeah, that maybe wasn't the best. For example, you picked the wrong argument. You're like, that was hard to fit into to the 3. I'll try a different one.
Yeah.
At a certain point,
Yeah.
like it gels. You're like, that makes sense. And you show it to people. You're like, oh, cool. I didn't know that. And it becomes almost the tool is invisible, where like it's almost not even demo the tool. It's just a dissection, and it's no longer about it. It's just such a, yeah, of course, that's the tool that Bentley uses. Oh, that's the whole point of the video. Oh, cool. I didn't know that. I just thought it was him dissecting an argument.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see.
I have a very important pancake related question.
Oh.
Which is that I usually don't, this is mix. It says to add 1 cup of pancake mix to 1 cup of milk for pancakes. But for waffles, it's twice the amount of liquid. That has to be wrong, right? Because waffles are more thick, not less thick.
Well,
It's
waffles are more
lying to me.
physically thick.
Yeah, that would be my intuition too, that there should be less liquid in a waffle than a pancake.
I don't know. I think of like the actual like the density of the pancake itself, not how thick it is and like the grooves and everything. It was actually being sort of like almost more spongy or hollow. Like I kind of think of pancakes as absorbing syrup better. So like there's less breading,
Right.
I would think, but like they're made crispier because of how it's shaped and how you make it in the waffle iron.
It is a new waffle iron, so we'll go with the mix.
This
We'll
meeting
try it.
just took
We'll
a
go with
weird
it.
turn.
I'm gonna follow instructions, and the universe is gonna slap me in the face with it and be like, "You knew this was to follow your intuition."
Just remind me of the time that we made gravy with pancake mix. It was not good. That is not a good substitution. Don't try it.
Yeah. So I put a comment on the Roundtable in Facebook with the link to my script.
Okay, cool.
Is that?
I see.
I don't see. It says live now. I don't actually see the video showing up. Oh, so now you click it.
Yeah, I know it's weird on Facebook because like there's that where it's got the thing. There's also a separate item that'll show up somewhere else in the feed. That's the actual video that has its own comments and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's they seem to be continually changing how this works, and things are a bit convoluted. Yeah. Anyways, but Adria, how are you doing with your stuff? Anything new?
Not really. Things were going okay with the development team that I was considering working with, but the last few updates from them have shown that that's probably not the team I want to work with. Have been actually producing the things that they were asked for. So I think the development advisor that I had been working with had discovered a new, like, I guess adjacent technology to the ones that we were working with called Supabase.
Oh yeah, I've heard of Superbase.
And apparently it's like 80% of what I'm asking. Like it's basically built like half of the project I'm asking for. Like it's a lot of it is the database management sort of open. Like, so he was asking them like to say like, hey, it seems like we should be using this. Can you draft up an estimate for the way you were going to do it, and then with this other tech stack instead, one of them being Supabase, and they just didn't do that, and they were sort of seemed resistant to it. It took them way too long to come up with an estimate that wasn't very good or detailed. So I'm just going to be reposting the job probably this weekend, and then the good thing is that I'll have all the content that I had already made for the previous people. Like the videos being recorded, I've worked on a few more things just to explain it. So hopefully this will be an easier round of trying to find a development team.
So Superbase is a good one, which is an open source Firestore or Firebase. Firebase, the Google version.
Right.
So oftentimes, like, I just do Google because it's easier, and that knowing that you're kind of captured, but you can then jump to one of these other systems, although they are different, so it's not an easy transportation. But there's also Pocket Base. It's somewhere. So you might. I don't know if you want to bother throwing that into the mix.
What technology is that based on?
Well, I mean, it's just like Superbase and Firebase. It's just.
Okay, just because I forget which tech Superbase is based on. I've got it in my notes because he was saying, like, as we're actually going through the job postings, part of the challenge is finding people on Upwork who either know that ideally, or who at least know the technology, so that they could like start implementing it even if they've never touched it before and figure it out. That's sort of
I mean,
2 levels for finding somebody to work.
So when you say a tech stack, Firebase or Superbase is the database of the tech stack, right?
Let me go look at.
So it's not which tech stack is it? It is a tech stack.
Well, but I think
it's a part of the tech stack.
Yeah, but like I guess core underlying technologies. I'm probably not explaining it well because where is
I think there's some confusion there because
I'm gonna need to register that as soon as I added that milk and couldn't go back on it, I wouldn't open the fridge and it exploded. The fridge exploded. So.
All right.
The fridge exploded?
The universe likes to give me instant, makes no sense feedback. You want to follow the directions?
Okay, so
Here, have an exploded fridge.
My notes that I'm hoping are correct was, okay, so when we asked for the 2 estimates, he was saying that one was like the Postgre / Supabase. So I guess the Supabase is based on Postgre. And then I think the dev team was originally going in the Laravel direction, and then they didn't actually end up providing the quotes that they were asked for. So I'm not sure what they actually provided. But I think that's what I was thinking of, is that he was saying that the Supabase was based on Postgre.
Postgres.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So it's a nuanced thing. Supabase happens to use Postgres behind it, but when you're interacting with it, you don't care what the database is.
Oh, okay.
And so in Firebase, the backend is Google's system,
right?
And in Pocket Base, it's its own system. So in neither of those 3 scenarios does the person need to know Postgres.
even if like they're implementing, let's say, Superbase and actually making changes to it to like, if there was some database management features, like if they, are 80% of the way there, to be able to tack on the extra 20% to be like, oh, we also want to be able to do this. Would you need to know it then?
It's the Superbase interface to Postgres is designed to handle the projects. If you need to do some coding if you need to know the Postgres part, then you're having to go around Superbase, and then you're not actually using Superbase anymore for that feature set. So it's kind of like digging deeper into the back end. So it's nice if someone understands it, but I wouldn't consider a requirement. If they say if they actually know Superbase, I wouldn't say, well, do you know Postgres?
Right. Yeah. The number one pick is somebody that actually knows Superbase. That list seemed to be very short on Upwork.
I mean, it's not a very big thing.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge, is to find somebody who knows that tech or who can learn it quickly. And then if nobody knows it, how do you hire somebody that doesn't know tech to work on it?
Yeah.
And like part of it is go learn it and then come back and work on it.
Yeah, I mean, if they know, like if I can't find anyone in that one, but there are some people that know Firebase, then I would consider them more than someone who says, oh, I know. Yeah, I don't know. If I had one person that knew Firebase and one person that knew Postgres, I think it'd be an upshot to say which one would be better to hire, because Postgres is just like one piece of everything that it does.
Right.
But Superbase is kind of patterned after Firebase, although there are differences. So yeah, you could probably say if you can't find someone that actually says they know Superbase, then either Firebase or Postgres would be good.
Okay. And
or Pocketbase, because I think
does Pocketbase have enough of a, like, how would you say it is sort of popularity wise, the chance of finding someone that knows Superbase versus Pocketbase? Do you think Pocketbase is easier or harder?
Pocketbase will be harder. It's newer. And actually Pocketbase probably isn't as fleshed out.
Okay.
It's supposed to be smaller.
Okay.
So if you're building prototypes, it depends on what level of scale you want to hit.
Right.
But I'm thinking about using Pocketbase on a lot of my demo stuff, or actual early prototypes. Like I could do all of Reason Score on Pocketbase right now, but if it was a completely interactive system like yours and I had 1,000 users, it may be like, oh, we need to move it from Pocketbase into Superbase.
Okay.
Anyways, but if someone happened to know Pocketbase, if you run across that, they might be able to convert pretty quickly to Superbase.
Okay.
But Superbase is probably a good decision, although the one that you're going to find the most people is Firebase. Yeah,
that I know, but I definitely don't want to be fully attached to any of it. Like if there was a Firebase clone that was enough of a clone that like it would be relatively simple to be like, oh, if we got kicked off of Firebase or had a fallout or for whatever reason couldn't use that, to be like, oh, then just pick it up and move it over here. We'll need to have a backup of the database going. But like if it were that simple,
yeah, unfortunately it's not a one-to-one replacement.
Yeah. And that's where, I mean, I totally understand the reasoning behind going to Firestore. I just, with this, I expect to piss off a lot of big companies if it takes off. So I don't want to be tied to any of them.
So you're not right now. You don't feel like you're building definitely not a prototype.
No, I've shifted to just saying it's an MVP. The goal is that it will be more long term. If it ends up being thrown out, I don't care, as long as it was like able to show proof of concept and people can look at it and be like, oh, I get what he's talking about.
Yeah. See, if you're thinking that you may have to do one more rewrite, I would just find someone that knows Firestore or Firebase, because a lot of the decisions you make, someone will be able to convert it over. It will have a cost, but if you're thinking this is an MVP, then so I want it all function, but I know I'm going to have to rewrite some 50% of it at some time to get to scale, or to remove the lock-in. I would still, if you can't find a Superbase developer, then I would either go with a Firebase dev and have them try and do it in Superbase, or I would just, if you do an MVP, I would feel okay with doing it in Firebase. I would say you would have to
I
rewrite.
might even go back to the suggestion that you gave, I think, a few months ago, that like the advisor I was talking to, he's like, he gets it, but he thought that it might complicate things. Although I'm now skeptical about that whole thing that he said, because
Right.
he wanted to keep the tech stack open to see what, and that just massively overcomplicated the whole thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it might be just going back to what you had said of like, just build the sort of the front end and the middle layer, and then the database, just use the Postgres Studio.
Oh yeah.
Because that, like, I'm not perfect with databases, but like I know enough, and like I could probably learn the other part of it. It's the coding part that I really don't know.
Yeah,
so that might be a good.
Yeah, that sounds like a good middle ground. So yeah, I would reconsider that. And then your other option is also the I guess, does both Postgres have authentication and everything built in nowadays?
I think if it doesn't, there's the other thing that
I
we're
mean,
using.
Superbase does.
I forget the names of all this.
Yeah, so yeah, it's just the Superbase and Firebase.
I believe we're still talking about using Django, so I think it was Django that would handle parts of that.
Okay,
I think
right.
that
had pre-built. So yeah, you want to make sure that whatever you're using has a pre-built auth system.
Right. Yeah. For as much as possible, we're trying to use pre-built stuff for like a lot of this, because for 99% of this, I'm not reinventing any wheels. This is all just stand right, like login and authorization and database stuff. Like that's
So I would I think take a step back and saying, okay, maybe we do this MVP in either using the Firebase tech or using the Django tech, and then using the I think those are all good options at this case. So maybe that'll loosen up your requirements a bit, and you can find it'll be a little easier to find a dev team.
From what you know about sort of Postgres and Postgres Studio, and then things like Superbase, if we started with like, I just use Postgres Studio to create the tables and fields and that whole thing, and they create the front end, and then later on we find somebody that's really good with something like Superbase, can you tack it onto an existing Postgres database, or does it kind of have to be like from the start you really need to use it?
You know what? I actually don't know how similar the structure is in the Postgres version of Superbase. But what you might do is, now that I'm thinking about it, I think the Superbase has an editor that's very similar to So you might think of that as a one-to-one replacement.
Okay.
So maybe go to superbase.com and see if you can get a free tier. 2 gigabytes of bandwidth, 50 megabytes, and maybe go in there and muck with it and see how far you can get.
Okay, cool.
Now that I'm thinking about it, I think they do have a table editor UI that you could use.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because that was a key part of why the advisor was recommending it. Is basically, I'm like asking for a database management application. That's like 80% of what I'm asking for. He's like, this is basically that. Like, it's just, okay. So that's cool.
So that's interesting. You might be able to create everything in Superbase, and then you just need to hire a front end person that knows how to use the Superbase API, which most devs that have integrated with any sort of backend should be able to learn it quickly.
So if you create. So I'm trying to think about this. So the account that you're talking about creating, that's a version that they're hosting, and then they also have a version that you can use in your own app.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you could host it yourself later on.
Oh, okay.
And that would be a pickup and drop.
Oh, I like that. That sounds way easier. So I don't have to worry about any of the hosting
because it's open source.
That's there. It's the same tech, and then once it's ready, I can actually spin up my own environment on something like DigitalOcean, get that spooled up with all the stuff, and then have a project to move it over and like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now setting it up, because these are it's not an easy setup, but it is something that definitely can be done, and you don't have to rewrite any of your database or code or stuff like that. It just may be a full operations person to keep it up and running. But at least with open source like this, you'll probably be able to find other hosters. If you ever not like them, there will be somebody that says, oh, I'm hosting Supabase on my own server set, come to me. And so it'll give you some flexibility.
Okay.
And then if you had to, you could do it yourself because it's open source.
Cool. Okay.
Yep, that's probably a great way to go. If you have the whole back end set up the way you think it should be, then it may just be finding a front end dev.
Right. Okay. And then I guess that would mean, think about the parts that we've been talking about that would go away. And yeah, I think that is just like all of the database parts, like all of the REST API and all of that, they'd be handling that then, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There might be a few things where you need a feature. Every once in a while, you have to jump out of their database and create a REST API endpoints that handles something like integration with other systems and stuff. You'd need the security of a second backend, but that's a lot less work. And so you'll have a majority of the API done through Supabase. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And those pieces can
API,
be tagged on.
Right. And that API is built into Supabase. So if I ever set up my own instance, then that would still work.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, yeah. Because I remember the advisor saying something about like that Supabase also sort of, it had like the REST API component, which sounded like it would also.
Oh yeah, they also have edge functions. Yeah. So when you build a database, it automatically generates a REST API endpoint for the database with security that you can manage. Although that may take a little bit more technical learning on your part to understand. But it's all configurable. It's not writing code. And then you would need help if you needed any edge functions that it's like, well, I'm not just hitting the database. I need to hit something else, or I need to do some processing. Then you'll need like edge functions.
Okay. Cool. That helped a lot.
Yeah. And I would look at not just the database of the Supabase, but I'd look at the real-time documentation as well. They seem to have a section for database and a section for real time. So real time means that, as people update the database, the changes will show up on everyone else's screen. So if you needed to do a chat app, or if you wanted comments to come in live and not have to refresh the screen, then you'll want to use the real time. So that'd be the one you'd want to kind of like learn.
Okay, cool.
So rather than database, look at the real time stuff, because that hits the database in the back end.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I know that one of the key things that like the advisor was trying to have the different development teams figure out and explain was the like, as we're making changes to the database, sort of how does the app know about it? Like, how would you handle that part of it?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the real time bit. So I would start at the real time bit, and then you'll learn the database as you do that.
Right.
Cool. Yeah. Well, let me know how it goes, and always feel free to hit bentleydavis.com and hit the little make a meeting if you want to.
Sure. Yeah. We'll do. I may.
Have we bored Jubilee enough? How's the pancakes? How are the waffles coming? She's probably running back to her computer now. Oh, well, look at that. This is now a cooking show.
Yeah. Is that with the double the liquid, or is that the same amount?
It is with double the liquid.
And it
The
looks like
fridge did fall apart. The waffles worked.
All right. It's a weird trade-off, but
just need to buy a new fridge every time you make waffles. What's the?
Why do people make waffles? They're so expensive. $900 every time.
Right. Okay.
The shelf came apart and everything came up.
Shelf fell down.
Nothing even broke.
Okay.
Everything got put back together. Perfectly fine.
Perfect.
So yeah, just some physical maintenance every time you do waffles. All right. Well, cool. If y'all ever have a chance to look at the video script, tell me. The main thing is like, would you enjoy watching it, even if it wasn't a project? Like, find it interesting to say this is how someone debunks someone else, and these are the results. And if we wanted to fight misinformation, here's what we could do to improve the situation.
I don't think I have like the producer mind to be able to look at a script and be like, could I watch that? I would try to like think of a way to make the most like, I don't know, a 2-minute clip of just like, what's the most sensational, like interesting thing that you could pull out of this? Like just the one clip, be like, could we make this as interesting as possible? Because part of the thing with content is like you can have a super interesting topic, but if you can't find a way to make it interesting to present, then you might watch an episode, but it would probably be hard to like get a following. If you can find a way to talk about interesting stuff in an interesting way, then
yeah, I guess that's true. The interesting way will be, so I'm actually modeling this off of What Culture. They do Star Trek and Doctor Who stuff, and they have an ups and downs episode. That's mostly Star Trek and then wrestling, actually. And so while they're going through the episode, they'll go the ups and downs and explain why it is. And so I'm doing a very similar thing for this. And then if you do a little bit more like, you know, popping stuff up and making it interesting and maybe throwing in a visual meme every once in a while, it might be interesting enough to watch. So yeah, I guess a lot of it has to do with the presentation piece.
Yeah. Like, if you just plan out a 1 minute storyboard in your head, and like for anything that you pop up on the screen, just use a Sharpie and draw it on paper. And just be like this, and then here's an infographic, and da 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 da. Just the like sketchiest, quickest $5 version that you can make, and then like, is that intro? And you know what? That might even be worth it to keep that part of it. That could actually make a show interesting. I would think, if you could find a way to do it well. But I think for all of that, it just comes down to can you make it interesting.
It might be quicker for me to pop the images on the screen faster than doing it.
Sure, yeah.
It's the scoring mechanism that I'd have to write some code for.
Right.
So we'll see. Yeah, maybe doing an experiment without that.
I think
or just having photos of it.
Like, unless it's meant to like explicitly be, you know, walking through the code snippets and that, I think for the most part, your tool has to be like almost invisible, where it just works in the background doing its stuff. And like to the audience, they wouldn't even know that it's effectively a demo of your tool, because it would be so.
Well, the only thing they would see is a meter with the score. So it's just it's a scoreboard. That's all it is. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And everything else is just you and the words and the content and the evidence. And
it'd be nice to have it animated. And honestly, I could do that in like 4 hours of work, so it's not that big a deal. So I might go ahead and do that. Yep. So yeah, I probably need to throw together a video with. Go ahead and do a trial with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and like, you know, just as because I'm a big fan of YouTube. That's where I consume a lot of my content, and I quite like the like unpolished, like I like that part of YouTube where it's not. Some people, you know, like the big channels are expected to have polish, but there's a huge underlying thing of like people don't really care. Like if it's just you in front of a webcam talking, as long as it's interesting, some people will watch. And then the more polish that you can add, and the more, you know, humor or whatever hook you're trying to go for, I think that's where shows I've watched for whatever reason, I'm like, oh, this is good. I'll watch more.
Yeah,
of this for sure.
I'm fine doing an interview show like that. I think for me, if I'm going to create content, I'm going to want to spend time at least putting up all the images, right? So it won't be like fancy, it won't be that fancy, but it will be a lot of work to like take screenshots and put them in.
Right.
So I think I've kind of decided that, and for this channel, I probably will do interviews, which will be very low thing, and then there'll be the more content ones that'll be 5 to 10 minutes of images popping up on the screen while I'm talking, and the score. Right. So yeah, I should probably go ahead and do one and see how it comes out.
Cool. Yeah, I'd be interested to see that when we make it, to see sort of how it looks, how that actually, you know, I'm interested to see sort of how the reason score, Reasonpedia, like how that whole UI fits into a conversation like about actually talking about it and then figuring out like, here's the person's claim, how does it show?
Oh well, so yeah, I don't actually think I'll show the claims or the arguments. It'll just be a score.
Okay, cool.
For this stuff, it's shallow enough that I don't need to go deep. If I need to go deep, I do need to figure out something else. But in this case, I think it's just going to be like, here's the number of pros and the number of cons, and then there's a what's it called? I forgot, but there'll be like, you know, the dot in the middle of the show where it is on a scale. So then as I add a con or as I add a pro, it'll move.
Right. Okay.
So that's probably all that will appear just across the bottom of the screen, so people can keep track of it, or on the side. And I might do it on the side and have it be pro up and con down, so they can see it kind of like a thermometer going up and down. And that'll be mostly it. And then if I get into something where it's like, oh, this would be a pro, but there's a sub con against it, so I may have it appear and then disappear, right? Rather than showing the whole tree. We'll see. Cool. Yeah, I'll probably give it a try and let y'all guys know when I have a prototype.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, I think that's it for today. Unless Jubilee, unless you have anything with your mouth full.
She has waffles.
All right. Well, I guess we'll see each other when we see each other, as opposed to in 2 months. All right.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Benny. Bye.